So chapter 3, how to use HTML to structure a web page. Objectives: the applied, code a properly structured HTML web page using the HTML5 semantic elements and any other elements that are presented in this chapter. Code a relative URL that refers to any file in the folder structure of a website. Describe the use of title and meta elements in the head section of an HTML document. Distinguish between a block element and an inline element. Describe the use of these block elements, H1, H2, H3, paragraph, and div. We covered a little bit of the inline stuff yesterday. We covered some of these block elements yesterday, kind of talked about the difference between block and inline. Describe the use of these inline elements, line break, EM, strong, and span. Describe the use of characters, entities like and NBSP or and copy. That NBSP we were messing with yesterday. I was trying to put it in brackets and it shouldn't have been in brackets, and that was what the problem was. That's a non-breaking space, so it kind of puts spaces in between your text or whatever else, and I'll show you an example of that when we start doing some of the coding stuff. Describe the use of these core attributes, an ID, class, and a title. Describe the use of the div and span elements in HTML for a modern website. Describe the use of these HTML semantic elements, header, footer, main, section, article, nav, aside, figure. Distinguish between absolute and relative URLs, and distinguish between root relative and document relative paths. Distinguish between the use of an anchor element and the image element. Describe the accessibility guides for anchor elements and image elements. Describe the 3 types of lists that you can create with HTML. So a browser that shows the title and a favicon. So as we showed yesterday, when we put the title in, up in your tab up there, you see your title that you actually put in. So they have the title, San Joaquin Valley Town Hall, Speakers and Luncheons, San Joaquin Valley. Because the tab's only so big, you can only fit so much in it, but if you hover over it, it'll show you the rest of your title. The little image up here that they have is called a favicon, and we'll work with those. I don't know if we do it in chapter 3, but one of these chapters coming up, we work with favicons. There's a site out there, if I find my mouse. It's favicon.io. This is the big one out there. It's free. You can generate images with it. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Let's see if I can get my Pikachu that I use all the time to make a favicon. So there's my little favicon. So if I use this link that it gives me, I'll be able to put my little Pikachu icon up in the corner up here, kind of like how Rankin has that little red R. GitHub has that little cat or whatever the heck that thing is. That there. So you can see the little favicons up here, and you can do that with this image converter part. You can do text, so you can go in here if you just want a D for like Dominic, J. You can change the font's family to make it look different. So you can do all kinds of stuff with it. Download that, it'll give you the code and stuff that you use. Put all that up in the head of your web page, and then it gives you favicons and stuff like that for it.
So the site that is called favicon?
.io.
GitHub's mascot is called, he's called Octocat.
Yeah, we had stickers somewhere around here for
Cat
it.
Octopus hybrid.
Yeah. Oh, here it is here. So if you want a sticker of an Octocat there.
I'm putting this on my laptop.
A lot of people have. They gave us a big stack of them last year, and that was like a couple of them that were left.
They wouldn't give us a fine. I first got it, maybe.
So yeah, you can go to that favicon.io favicon.io. If you search for favicon generator, this is one of them that will come up, and it's the one I've used the most creating these favicons. So what you do, again, in your head section of your code and your HTML, there's your title that's up in the head like we talked about earlier, and then you just put a link, the relationship for that link, shortcut icon, and then the href for that favicon ICO. That ICO is just the extension for that type of file that you're going to use there. And again, the href is the attribute for that link. A head section includes metadata. So metadata is stuff that your browser is going to use to tell it about data on the page. So like that char set UTF-8 there, that just tells it character encoding for the document to make sure it interprets the code properly. This meta name description, you put a description of your web page in there. Meta name keywords, you put keywords of your web page in there. And what those meta, like the names and the description keywords part do is when you go out to a search engine goes and looks for that stuff. And so the more descriptive you can be with your descriptions and your keywords in that, the better chance Google or whatever has of finding those keywords and bringing you up to the top of the search engine things. And it's called SEO, search engine optimization. They hire people just with that knowledge a lot of times out in the real world to help people get their websites ranked higher and higher into Google results or whatever search engine, Bing, to get them found easier and faster and stuff like that. So as you do web pages, more commercial ones than anything, even your personal ones if you're doing for small business or whatever, keep these the meta name description and meta name keywords in the back of your mind. That way when you put a web page out there, it helps the search engines find the stuff a little bit easier and get you to get better results on the search engines. And that brings us to the search engine optimization guidelines for title tag. Always include a title tag in the head section, kind of what I showed you earlier, Dominic. The title should accurately describe the page's content. The title should include 1 or 2 focus keywords that you want to be used for ranking the page. So like your home page, whatever your name of your home page is, that's probably what you want to put in your title just so it gets found faster. If you have a contact page, I'd use like my website name and a contact description in that title just to try and get it ranked a little bit higher. Title should be interesting enough to entice the readers to click on it when it's shown in the search results for a search engine. The title should be unique for each page in your website. So each page could or should have its own title on it. You can use the same one over and over if you want, but usually each page will have its own title. Limit the length of your titles to around 65 characters because most search engines don't display more than that in their results. So if we go we type in Rankin Technical College, you can see that comes up first. Another one under niche. So ranking comes up quite a bit when you go search out there for it. Put my name in, see what comes up. LinkedIn, one of the first ones. Here's ranking. So it goes out and searches for stuff like that. It goes, finds it. That's how a lot of that stuff comes back on a search engine. Goes out and looks for that meta keyword stuff in the web pages and pulls it back. Include the description metadata for each page in your website. That's the description. on the metadata there. The description should summarize the contents of the page. It should be unique for each page, and it can be longer than the title tag. The better your description is for that meta tag, the better it is for your web page. The more stuff you can put in there that talks about your web page, the better chance it has of getting a hit when they go out and search. When the description is displayed in the search engine results, it should encourage users to click your link. So make it an exciting description or something that's going to capture the user's attention and yet still talk about your web page. All this meta stuff here is just trying to get your search engine ranked, trying to get people to view your web pages. That's what everybody's looking for with their web pages most of the time. Include keyword metadata for each page of your website. There's the keyword part of it here. I was always told put as many keywords in there as you possibly can about yours. Here they say you should use no more than 10 or a phrase in the metadata, and the metadata should be unique for each page. So each page, put unique keywords in there that's going to talk about your page or describe your page. Try and get the attention of the users, get the search engines to find that stuff, and try and get your page ranked up as high as it possibly can. And like I said, they pay people good money just to do search engine optimization stuff to help get websites ranked. HTML that uses H1, H2, and a paragraph block elements. So here they have the H1 San Joaquin Valley Town Hall programs. That H1 is the largest heading you put on a page. Usually you only want to have one H1 element on a page. After that you start using like the H2s, the H3s. The H's go through 6 is being the smallest one they have. H1, they have H2 pre-lecture coffee, and then a paragraph, and these are considered block elements. When you see block elements, it means they kind of space them out a little bit, like how we showed yesterday with that line break, how they dropped it right underneath and kept it real tight. These block elements all have a space between them, and if we go out and look at like the developers tools like we used yesterday and moved over those colored boxes, they would show us like padding and stuff like that around each one of those block elements, because that's how they're set up. So they're each one in a little block by themselves. So if you hear block element, that's what you're thinking about, is just each one has its own little block kind of around it. It's usually all spaced out, started on a new line. They're never on the same line together. They'll always have their own line and everything that they start on. SEO guidelines for heading tags. Use the heading tags to show the structure and importance of the content on a page. Always use the H1 tag to identify the most important information on a page, and only code a single H1 tag on each page. Then decrease one level at a time to show subsequent levels of importance. When they say decrease one level at a time, that means going from an H1 down to an H2 down to an H3 through 6 kind of a thing. And don't use heading levels as a way to size text. Instead, use CSS to size the headings. So most of the time when you have an H1, you want to leave it as an H1. If you want an H1 and want it bigger, you can size it bigger if you want with CSS. But I usually don't mess with my H1s once I have an H1. I just leave it. I don't usually resize it. If I want different sized headings or whatever, I just make it a paragraph or a div and then go through CSS and bold it and highlight it and everything else that needs to be done, make it giant. And so HTML that uses block elements. So you can see here the paragraph is a block element, so that would have its own little area. It'd be on one line, have some space between it. Here they're using a pre-tag, putting a little JavaScript in here to get the date, to put the date up on the screen. Another paragraph, Ernest Hemingway, a block quote, paragraph, an address, Here's the mail to that you see in chapter 2 or 3 labs or homework. So let me bring my thing up here. I'll go copy and paste that in here real quick just so you can see what all that looks like. I think they show it. Oh yeah, here they show it on the next page, so I won't worry too much about that. So here's that first paragraph, how to use JavaScript to display the year. You can see it's kind of in its own line, got some spacing in between it. Here they do the pre-tag, show the date, the code to get the date for the year. Another paragraph Ernest Hemingway wrote. You can see again it's on its own line, got the spacing in between it. Got the block quote, cowardice as distinguished from panic, blah blah blah. In the block quote you can kind of see it indents it in there. Has its own little section because it is a block element. Oops. The next paragraph, how to contact Mike Murock. This ampersand, this and sign, and the amp, that puts that fancy little and sign in there like that.
That looks like my own essay, but I don't like it.
Yeah, it's a fancy and sign there. So a lot of times when you put special characters in like that, you got to use these little ampersand and sign things to make them work. I think up in the top here where we started talking, like that and BSP and the and copy. This and copy makes a copyright sign, and I think we'll take a look at that here in a minute. And that and BSP is just a non-breaking space. It puts in space in between words and stuff like that. And then here you got an address. You put an address tag and you put the stuff to do with an address in between it. These div tags, you'll see these div tags a lot when you're looking at HTML. Those div tags, all they are is just like a container to hold stuff in them. So it's not a paragraph, it's not anything like that, it's just a container. So you'll see these div tags used a lot. A lot of times they have an ID associated with them. That way, if you want to manipulate the style in them, you can go find that ID that goes with that div and then sort it all out through there. So, like here, let me find one here. I'll take this just real quick. Make that an ID. Get rid of this because this is giant on the page. So this should be pink colored text now that we created a div and made it that. And I'll do a second one here. Save that. We still have our old web page up here. Oh, I gotta open it off here. So if we look at this now, you can see this is that first div we created. This is the first div we created, saying div, we gave it an ID of test. We use this ID up here that we talked about yesterday. Use the color of it, call it pink. And then when we look at our web page, you can see it's pink. The div down here, we didn't style it at all, and so it's just normal black text. But you can see it has it's on its own line because it is a block element in that. So I think if we do an BSP and NBSP. NBSP. So if we do that and save it, you can see it puts a nice space in between there. That's that non-breaking space that puts space in it, but it doesn't break it down to a new line compared to if we did a break like that, as we were talking yesterday. And you can see there's our non-breaking space in there, and that's a cruddy color to use. So you can see that's our non-breaking space because it doesn't break our line, but then when we put that BR in there, it breaks the line and drops it down to the next one. So that's the difference between there. So this NBSP and that are considered inline elements because you just put them in the line of the code, the text that you're doing, and it doesn't make it into a block element or anything like that. It just stays in the line. These are block elements since they make them sorted out nice, put them on their own lines, make it look clean. And then finally, I know in your labs they have an email to thing that you have to set up in there. What you want to do with that is, this is a hyperlink is what it is. I don't know what that VT is for. So just like you would do a link on your page, you do it the same way. You create the anchor, you make your href attribute, and then instead of putting your link in quotes, you're going to use this keyword email to. You have to use this email to, if not, it's not going to work right. So then you put email to, and then you put your email address that you want to send it to. And just like the link that you want to click, you put the text in there, and then close your anchor. And because we have this in a div, we close the div. You could put it in a paragraph if you want to put it in a paragraph, and it'll still work the same. So when you do it like that, what it ends up doing is it creates you email to. So when you click on it, oh, it should open my email up. It normally opens up your email, whatever your default email is, your Outlook or whatever. It'll open it up, and it should set you up to send an email for it. I don't know why this one's not doing it for some reason.
I'm also kind of curious too, so like, I don't want to ask what that would look like, because technically like kind of give the answer at that point, but.
What looks like?
So your own default email, so I'm kind of feeling like Android, where it kind of be prompted like to like open up a certain browser, but the thing is,
But
when it comes to like an email, I'm trying to think like.
it shouldn't matter. So I can do like, I can email to that and do a file save, and then when you click on it, it should bring up an email. I don't know why it's not. Usually it brings up some kind of default email. Let's see if it brought it up on here and I didn't notice it. But like, I don't have an email set up on this computer technically. I use one online, but so like you'd click on it and it would open like Microsoft Outlook would come up usually, and then you can send an email. It'll open it up to where you can type out an email and stuff like that.
Gotcha, but then again, what I also want to make sure I kind of like paste like a link to like multiple emails.
Well, if you make multiple emails, what you'd have to do is like, I can just copy this.
Then I kind of meant like, basically when the user kind of clicks on the link, I kind of want to have it where in case I have a Gmail, I can have it go to Outlook or Yahoo, so basically like 3 tabs open all at once.
So you'd have to have 3 different links for it. So you'd have to do something like this.
Gotcha.
So that's my ranking one. And then file save, and then so you have to have one for each separate one. So this would open, well, not open, but it would have you'd be able to email me at work, you'd be able to email me on my Gmail, and you'd be able to email me at home, technically, is what you'd be able to do there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, so Gmail, home email, and then regular email.
Yeah, so all that matters is what you're putting in here for your email address. So if you have, what is it, Dominic
Yeah.
_Carney?
Yeah, also .insideranking.com.
Yeah.
Which I don't even know if I had the on that part. And that's .insideranking.com. Yeah, there we go, sorry.
So now what would happen if I click on this, it would get an email ready to send you to that email. So then I could just type it out, hit send, and it would send it to your inside ranking email.
Gotcha.
So you have to have this keyword email to and the colon here. And then whatever email you want them to send the information to, that's what you put after the colon. And then once you close that bracket after all that, this is what's going to show up as the link on the web page. Is going to be this text that we add after all this email to stuff. So this is what you'll see on screen. So what we see is the link, and even though it says that if I click it, it's still going to want to email you at your email address or your inside ranking address, because that's what we have set up as your email address there. All right.
Yep.
So a lot of students seem to struggle with putting this email to in front of their email address. A lot of them would set it up like a regular hyperlink, and then it wouldn't work, or you lose points for it because you're not setting up your email to properly and stuff like that. So just remember, it's set up like a hyperlink, but you have to use this email to keyword and then your email address behind it to get that to work right. And I'm recording this, so I'll end up putting it out there today. So with these address tags, that's just a special tag to say all this stuff in here has to do with an address or something like that. If you want, you could put your home address in there as a paragraph. And I'll put the address tags around here just for an example. That's the one thing I don't like about this. Usually want to have these all formatted nice. Usually you indent, you can put the main one outside and then indent everything underneath it, so you can kind of tell it all goes with these tags here. I think there's a key on here or a link that you can format. One of these have a format thing on it somewhere. But there's a shortcut key too with it. I'll have to look it up. But it'll format it for you and indent everything nice and properly the way it should and stuff like that. So your your stuff starts getting sloppy, click on that, and I'll clean it all up and make it look good. I don't see it, but it's out there somewhere. But anyhow, that's how you kind of want to line up your page, is just have it so whatever's underneath it, that goes with the indents. So then to finish that off, oops, I can do another div and then put my home address in here. So something like that, save it. And there's my address there now. And if I want to, I could put a paragraph around this just to make it a little bit better. So then I would tab that in just to make it look good, and I could either close that or leave it like that, just to show that that paragraph belongs to that div. These divs belong under the address part of it, so it's just kind of a styling to make your code easier to read. Again, that's what it looks like with the block elements up here. HTML, it uses some of the inline elements. So the EM, that's just an emphasis on your code. So here we could do, in our regular text, we can just do an EM. EM, we go look at that, it should be bolded. Usually it bolds it. But usually bolds it. EM stands for emphasis, so it usually bolds it so you can see it a little bit better.
Could I use that thing called, what is it? The font generator thing, where I can just like put, I guess, a special character, not special character. You're changing like the look of the letter.
So if you want to do style on it, you can change the style on it, but you have to do some other things to it. So like our test, you could do like font weight bold. And now our first one up here, test, definitely should be bolded. And you can see it is bolded because we switched that font weight to bold. And we can do like a font size, and we can do 300 pixels. That should be pretty big. Hey, what's up? So you can see I put the font size to 300 pixels, and you can see it makes it pretty big there. Definitely an attention getter at that point. Move it down to 30, and you can see it's still pretty big just using that font weight. So when we start getting more into these styles here like that, they are very powerful. Like I said, that's the beauty part of this. The HTML elements and that's the backbone, the body of it all. The style is the beautification of it, putting a pretty face on it all, and the JavaScript becomes the brains of a lot of it, kind of a thing. So strong, that's another one that will bold your text for you. So if we look here, and you can see that jest that we did, that we wrapped that strong around. ends up being bold. So that strong just makes it bolder to stick out. You give everything set up and running all right?
Yeah,
So far so good. The KBD is for keyboard, so if you're doing something that you need them to type on the keyboard, you can type in that KBD, and it'll do a little bit of emphasis on the text. We'll put one here. I hate how they close it right away. So around our little div part there, you can see the div, it changes the style of it a little bit to show that it's supposed to be a keyboard kind of a thing. Honestly, in the real world, I've never used the keyboard one. Never needed it for any of the work I've ever done in the past, but just something to know that it's out there. Yeah, I guess I could have shared it on Discord, couldn't I have? It's out on that AWD Rankin classroom one that we just created for this semester. Oops, I don't want that one. There you go, it's out there now if you want to, instead of looking at the screen the whole time. They have a sub, which makes it like a subscript, so your 2 will be lower than the H and the O. So I'm just going to copy this line here, just to give you an example what that looks like out here. I'll put it under all my address stuff. So now our H should be on the line, the 2 should be a little bit below it, and the 0 should be back on the normal line with it. And you can see how it does it. It puts a little subscript down there so the 2 isn't on the same line. If we remove that sub there, now it'll just be all one word on one line. You can see. What's that? I'm just recording it. I'm not really actually live streaming or anything like that. I just started streaming the actual thing on Discord so you can see it there. But I have it recorded and I can put it out there after class. So. And then finally they have a Q, which is for quotes. I'll just take this and copy it so you can see what it actually looks like, and probably the next slide will actually have the examples. And yep, so that just puts quotes around your text that you put in there. To sleep. Get dreamy over there. So you can see it puts quotes around it. And then looking at the next slide, it just gives us the same examples, a lot of this. So the emphasize, I guess it actually makes it almost italicized, I guess you would call it. Same thing as the italics, so you can see it was like that, and I guess it did actually do that in our code. The strong makes it bold, like I said. The keyboard just changes the look of the text, so it has something to do with the keyboard kind of entry thing. The sub puts that letter or whatever you're using down just a bit below the sub line, and then the Q for the quotes puts quotes around everything. Most of the time as you're coding this stuff out, like the quotes and stuff like that, you don't have to worry about. I mean, you can just type them in as normal text most of the time and not have a problem with it. Character entities. This is the NBSP stuff I was talking about, that non-breaking space. Here's one for a single quote, a left quote, right quote, non-breaking spaces, a copyright sign, and an ampersand, and that fancy and sign that we showed. So if we take a look at this next slide, you can see they put an apostrophe in there. That's what that is there. It's an apostrophe. And then a single quote up on this side is there. The quotes for that side is there. So you can see there's the quote that they added and the quote that they added with this. And LDQUO, RDQUO is just putting these quotes in here like this. Keep going the wrong way. The non-breaking spaces, so you can see it should have been lined up to the left. They put those in BSPs in here and pushed the text over a little bit to the right. We looked at that earlier in one of our examples. And then this and copy, you'll be using that a lot in these labs, so they'll have you copyright in a lot of your websites that you're going to be creating in these labs. So you want to get familiar with this and copy thing for sure. You'll be using it a lot. So usually you put that and then the name of whatever your website is or whatever you're designing next to it. So it kind of looks like that. And then they use this ampersand sign, ampersand amp, to get this fancy little and sign in there. So there's a lot of those little character entities out there. Let's take a look and see. So you can go W3C schools, non-breaking space. Here's a bunch of them here that you can use. Ampersand, double quote, single quote, cent sign is the ampersand and cent will get you a cent sign. You can use a pound sign, a yen, a euro, the copyright, trademark. They are case sensitive. So combining some of the marks so you can get these fancy foreign letters and stuff like that created. So there's a few of them out there. There's probably more. Yeah, some of the symbols you can create with them. So you can create all these crazy Greek letters and stuff, mathematical symbols with these elements. You can do, there's the copyright again. Registered, euro sign, trademark, some of the arrows, poker signs there. So create emojis out there with some of these. So if you want to create emojis, you can put them in there like that. So pretty neat. Back in my day, you couldn't do the emojis and stuff. You could use a lot of like the copyright stuff and all that, but not get all crazy with some of these they've come up with now and that. Well, pretty neat. Code that uses the core HTML attributes. And the core HTML attributes, again, is that language one that you put up in your HTML tag to show that you're using the English language as your page gets rendered. They got all different kinds for that. They got French, they got Russian, everything you can think of pretty much to change the language for people that are foreigners that look at your web page. I think we took a look at one yesterday on ESPN or something, and it had like 23 different languages it was translating into. And then the class attribute tag. Class is used mostly for styling. You reuse it a lot to style a lot of things with the same style over and over again. Instead of having to create new styles for everyone, you just use the class attribute and give it the first property or whatever you're naming it to have it work. Again, the class ID is the same way, but when you use an ID in your code, you want it to be unique. You don't want to use an ID and have the same name over and over again for an ID, because as we get into JavaScript is going to use those IDs to get these elements we're creating and manipulate them in a certain way. So almost like in the C# class where we're using variables to pull data in, we're going to use these IDs eventually to start pulling data in and stuff like that. So you want to keep your IDs unique to each part that you use. Don't rename them. Don't give the ID of email and then use an ID of email over and over again. use email 1, email 2, but make sure they're unique. So when you go access them later on, it doesn't cause you issues.
Like whenever, if I wanted to pull like Discord in from that, you'd have to put like Discord equals. Is that what you're talking about? Like pulling data in from other?
No, so like we'll have forms is what we're going to use.
Right.
And so the forms is just going to have a bunch of text boxes on it. To get that data out of the form, we'll have, so if you have a name, so we'll have a name in a text box, address in a text box. And so what we'll do in our text is you'll have code, and it will be like text, something, and then you'll give it an ID, and then you'll call it name. And then in our JavaScript, we'll do like a document, get element by ID. And what this is doing, this get element by ID, is getting this element by the ID name, and then we're going to pull the value out of this text box with it eventually. So yeah, that's, I don't know if you noticed in C# at times I kept saying document by, and it's like I was so used to the JavaScript, coming out of the JavaScript class and going into that. But we'll use this document get element by ID. Sorry you can't see it over there. But so we'll do the document get element by ID, and that's what we'll use most of the time to pull data out of these text boxes and stuff like that. We'll use this document get element by ID to change, like we can change the background color in this text box if we want to by this ID and value and stuff like that. So, and that would be,
And that way you could use it throughout your whole code.
yeah, you can use it over and over. So
That makes sense.
So whatever you need to do, you go look for this ID and go manipulate because of the ID kind of thing. And that's why you want them all unique, because as we go do this, you have a bunch of, like a name, a first name and a last name on here, and you just name the ID name for both of them.
Yeah.
It's going to break
It's gonna
because
be
it doesn't know which
confused.
one to
Right.
pull, and so that's why you want to keep them unique.
Okay.
So we can get particular on what we're trying to pull and what we're trying to use.
So you do ID equals and then you put the quotes?
Yep, put it in the quotes,
Okay.
just like it shows here. And anything, for the most part, an attribute will usually be something, a word like this, and then have an equal sign. And then whatever follows the equal sign is going to usually be in quotes. So when you see class equals, ID equals, title equal, that's an attribute.
What were you talking about? You had to put like a certain thing and then it puts quotes around it automatically.
That's the single character entities or the character entities.
Right, is that the same thing?
No, that's not going to be. They always start with this fancy ampersand sign.
Yeah.
So if you look, all these character entities start with this little fancy ampersand sign.
Right.
And so, like this one, you do the fancy ampersand sign, put copy, and it'll put a copyright symbol on your sheet.
Oh, that's just for a certain, okay, so that's like a whole different thing.
Yes, yep. That's got nothing to do with IDs or manipulating anything. That's just putting something on your page, some kind of look on your page. So you can see it just puts the copyright symbol there, puts that fancy ampersand sign there.
Okay.
These NBSPs, they stand for non-breaking space.
Yeah,
Yep.
where
So
it tabs over.
yep, spaces it over however many times you put those in there. I've seen some where they've had like 100 of those non-breaking spaces just to space it out right, and it's like you probably could have used CSS to get it looking a little easier, but
I've seen Paul's, whereas his goes like all the way over and then like all the way down. His is crazy. His has got some crazy patterns
Yeah.
for sure.
Honestly, I don't think you ever actually need to use the non-breaking spaces. Like if you're ever using those, you're probably making a mistake somewhere.
Really?
no, you would be surprised. You will see them quite a bit out in the code.
Occasionally.
Yes, you will see them. You will see them. They do get used a lot, surprisingly, but yeah, you will see them out there in the
They
code.
get used, but I don't think it's ever like the best or the right way to do it.
A lot of times you'll see them like when you have a text box to kind of space it off your colon and stuff like that, just to give it a little bit more room to kind of line stuff up. But
Okay.
but yeah, if you use like the grids and all that stuff nowadays, right, you can style most of it up without having to use that non-break. But there's still times that it might not be perfect, and just to force it to get it right, you'll put that non-breaking space in or whatever kind of a thing. The input type, text, email, and again, that's why I said here's the input box with that ID, just kind of like shorthanded up there, kind of. They put a title in there, email here. So when you hover over it, it should say like email here. Yeah, here it is right here. They got the little box that says enter email here. So put that title in there. If you hover over it, it'll give you like a little tip, tool tip kind of a thing. And then here's the input for a submit button. They changed the name on it to subscribe, just kind of like how we were creating the Windows application forms. This is our version of a button here in HTML. It's a submit type button, and it's got a value of subscribe. So if you look at it, you can see here's our button. It's got the text on it, subscribe. So when you click on it, so submit it or do whatever it's supposed to do. And we'll end up coding some of that out. A lot of them won't work because we don't have access in here to what we need to get it to submit properly and stuff like that. But just so you're used to it, when you go over to Mr. OG's and you guys are creating these web pages, you will be submitting stuff and sending stuff back and forth. Use the HTML5 semantic elements to indicate the structure of your page. These semantic elements are like the header, main, footer, and as you're doing these labs, pay attention to this, because a lot of them will say put a navigation bar in your header. The header here is different than the head file that you have in your HTML. So this is the head part of your HTML here. This header is a totally different thing, so don't get those two confused. This header is usually the top part of your page. So the way it breaks down, doesn't show it good here, is you'll have, I'll try and get over here so you can see a little bit better, Jason, is you have your main page, and then you'll usually have your header up top, because that's the header part of your page. That's the top part of your page. So usually it follows this pattern as a header, close header. Then you have your main part of your page, and that's where all your main information goes. So you'd have like paragraphs in here and whatnot. You'd have your H1 in here more than likely, or your H1 would be up in your header, depending on where you want to use it. They have is it on there? No. There's another one called a nav for like a navigation bar. Your nav bar a lot of times will be up in your header area up here. Like that. A lot of times your navigation's up in the header, so it's at the top of your page so you can see it, access it easy. And then you have a footer. A lot of times your footer is static, so you can just copy and paste it on all your pages, because most of the time it's like your copyright stuff and your favicons, the link to Facebook and all that kind of stuff. So this is kind of like the main way you want to lay out your pages. As you read through your labs and that, pay attention where it's telling you put your nav bar and stuff, because a lot of them say put it up in the header, and a lot of people didn't do that. They'd miss that, or put it on its own little line, and it shouldn't have been. It should have been in the header. So as you read through that, just kind of pay a little bit of attention to it. But the semantic elements, when I did HTML, when I very first started HTML, there was basic ones we used. There was no header, footer, or anything like that. Well, now you can call these tags anything you want. So it's like, I could give it a name of Doug if I really wanted to. And it would work. It wouldn't throw any errors or anything. But back in the old days of coding, that would never be allowed. You wouldn't do that. Well, with XML is like HTML. It's another markup language, was what this is. This is hypertext markup language. Forgot what the X on the XML is for. extensional markup language, I think is what it is. But in there, you can name your tags anything you want to do with the data that you're putting in there. And so I guess it's kind of carried over from the XML into the HTML to where you can start giving your elements whatever names you want to, as long as it's kind of associated with what you want. This class will mostly use like header, main, footer, nav, and stuff like that. But with XML being an extensible markup language and HTML being a hypertext markup language, they kind of merge together and now let you use these semantic elements. And I think if we take a look here real quick. And again, W3 Schools, I'd always recommend going out there and checking their stuff out. It's very informative. So you can see they have the header, the nav bar is up in the header area. You got a section for a section of stuff that you want to put in there, an article to put an article in, an aside to put stuff in the aside. So now they have like a time, a summary, a section, a mark, a main. So they're using more and more regular words to show what things are on your page and stuff like that. So a lot of times you'd see like where it says div ID nav, div class header, div ID footer. You used to make divs and name them what they are. Now with the semantics, you can just make a tag called footer instead of having to make a div and call it a footer kind of a thing. So a little less confusing as you're making these pages and stuff like that. So you can see they have a section here, and then they put an H1 and a paragraph in the section. They have another section. Here they have one called article. They put an article inside there, a little bit of an article. So you can see how it comes out. It's just a little bit more cleaner for code. HTML, you'll see a lot of element tags and stuff in there like that. So makes it a little bit easier to read as you're looking through this HTML code and stuff like that. But yeah, back when I first started, you never saw any of these. It was always the basic body, paragraph, div kind of a thing, and now they're putting all these fancy
How do they
semantics.
update that like that?
When or how?
How do they update
How?
that?
When they release new versions like HTML5, 4, like when I started it was just HTML, there was no numbers behind it, but now that they keep adding all these things into it.
So did you have to relearn that in order for it to work?
Yeah, you had to kind of get familiar with it, but if you keep up with the stuff, it's not bad. But like from the time I did HTML, started it to like doing some of it now, like in the CSS stuff, we never had Bootstrap when I was coding. It was always, we had to create our own Bootstrap code, so we had to code it all out, lots of lines of code and stuff like that. Now they got Bootstrap, somebody else coded all that stuff out, put it in the library, and all we got to do is call a tag and it brings it in and works for us. So some of it's nice, you know, the Bootstrap, it's like good, I don't have to code all this crap out to get it to work. But then sometimes it's like, well, I don't want it to work exactly like this, so then you may have to rewrite something to get it to work just the way you want it. But big time saver now that they're creating all these libraries
yeah,
and stuff
for sure.
that you can go use instead of having to code it all out yourself, kind of a thing. So use HTML5 semantic elements to indicate the structure of your page. Again, SEO is search engine optimization. That helps get your page ranked and found better on Google and any the search engines. They go search through these tags to look for certain things in these tags and helps bring back your website higher rank, depending on what you have and how you have them used and stuff like that. Here's what the page looks like. You got your header, you got your main, you got your footer, you got your header. Here's the main part of the text, and here's the footer. You can see they're using that little copyright sign here again to put the little copyright sign. Yeah. Figure and fig capture elements. You don't see these used much out in the real world like that. More than likely it would have been a div, and I I still don't see it much today when I go look at people's websites and stuff like that. You have figure, fig caption, so you'll have something in the figure, and then it has a little bit of text underneath it to capture it. So it's just kind of what it looks like. There's your figure. It puts the code in there, and you can see it uses a little bit different text because they're using this code tag here. And then your fig caption is just text to go with the thing. So it's almost like if you look at an image in a book or anything you're reading, and it shows you like figure 9 and it gives a little description of it. That's kind of what this fig and fig caption's doing. But like I said, you don't see it much out in the real world. Page structure with div and span elements. You will see divs all the time still being used. It's just so easy to use them. Like I said, all they are is a little container to hold stuff in. Here they're holding an H1 tag in it, that San Joaquin Valley. They give it an ID of header. This one they give an ID of main. And this one they give an ID of footer. So what they're doing here is just using these div tags, giving them IDs, and making them work like here. Instead of using the header element, main element, and footer element, they're using divs and just giving them an ID of header, main, and footer. Then when you do your style sheet, you can set it with the ID and style it using these IDs here. So that's all they're doing. The span tag just fits in between. It's like more like an inline element, so it goes right in line with the code. And depending on what style they use, they may bold this welcome, the San Joaquin Valley Hall or something like that. We'll take a look at the next page and see what they do with it. But you can see all they did was they got an H1 in the top and just splits it up just like they did on this one here using the header, main, and footer element tags. They're just doing it with divs instead here.
Oh, so it's cleaner like that?
Using the header, main, and footer is a little bit more clean. Some people like doing it like this just so you can actually just read those tags and see what it is rather than having to type out div ID header, close the div. So like where it says div ID header, so where it says div ID header, we're just doing an element called header here. So it's doing the same thing, just this saves a little bit of time typing it out. You don't have all the div stuff, a little bit cleaner. But like now, because we have a header on here, we can just do our style sheet with a header and then style it like that using this as our element instead of having to do our style sheet with the ID of header. And as we get more into style sheets, you'll start to understand that a little bit better. But so they're using it's shorthanded way, I guess, a little bit longer way of doing it. Just depends on how you want to do it. But it all works the same. I think that's what they're really trying to show you, is just how it works with a between a div, using divs and using the semantic elements in it.
Right.
Accessibility and SEO guidelines for div and span elements. Use div tags only when the HTML5 semantic elements don't apply. Use span tags only when the tags for identifying content don't apply. But like I said, 99% of the time you see these div tags used more than the semantic element tags. And if you look, let's go find a web page real quick. This one here for name.com, we go view their page source. I don't have much, it's all long. Let's see if I can find a better one. favicon. We'll see what theirs looks like. So you can see the favicon one here. You got divs all over the place. You got divs. So you can see how much divs are really used in these web pages. Anchor tag, paragraph, more div stuff here. Paragraph anchor tag, another div right here. So you can see how often these divs are actually used out in the real world. I actually got a figure out here, that's surprising. So there's that figure tag we had just talked about. Another div right there for the nav bar. There's an ID they set up for this div right here. There's the div with an ID called app. So here's the HTML where they set the language to English. So as you go look at these real web pages, you can see they have, here's their title right here. You can see they have all that same stuff we're talking about now. So this is what your pages will end up having. Here's that meta name tag that we were talking about earlier. This data view tag is some other stuff that we don't go into. There's that char set UTF-8, stuff like that. Here's a viewport we'll be using later on. These viewports that size your web pages and stuff. So you can always go out on any web page, right click, view their source, and see how much they actually use a lot of these elements and what all is actually out there. So simple folder structure, I kind of talked about this yesterday a little bit. Your root directory has all your main stuff in it. Usually it's your index page and stuff like that. Most of your web pages will go in there. Usually have an image folder. The styles folder is usually a CSS folder is what they call it most of the time. You will have a JavaScript folder. When you get more into it, you'll end up adding C# folders and stuff like that. They'll be called different things and whatnot. You can have an about folder and then have your HTML files and your about stuff in here. Same with, you can have a books folder and have all your HTML and CSS stuff in there. So what they're saying here is you got a root folder with all your HTML pages. You got a book folder here that holds your HTML and book stuff, your HTML for your books. And then inside this books folder, you have a JavaScript folder, a Java folder, PHP, and a C# folder. You can also have an image folder in there if you want. You can have a style folder in there if you want. So this is a common way of setting up a web page. So you have your main folder, and ours are going to be fairly simple. So we'll have you'll have your root folder all the time. You'll have an image folder. You'll probably have a style CSS folder, and you'll probably have a JavaScript folder. Is probably the three main ones we'll be working with in this class. Working with URLs and paths. An absolute URL that contains the whole HTTPS, whatever it is, the whole long list of stuff. That's your absolute URL. It's the absolute path to a website kind of a thing. So like if we go back and look at our example here, I'll go back to our index page. I have ESPN in here from yesterday. That's the absolute path for the ESPN. If we go, let's find something else. We can go inside ranking. So to get inside ranking, we have to copy all that down. This in a paragraph just to make it look a little more clean. And we go click on this inside ranking. Ooh, that's ugly. It should take us to that inside ranking page. just like it should. It took us to inside ranking. And then if we want to change this and have it go to, we created 3 pages yesterday. I was showing Dominic some examples on how to create different pages. So say we wanted to go to our contact page, since these are all in the same folder. These are all in our root folder. So if we go look on the desktop in my HTML demo, you can see I have an about, a contact, and an index. An about, a contact, and an index. They're all in the same folder. These are relative URLs. They're all in the same area. So you can see root, relative, path. These are all in the same area, so we don't have to put the HTTP, www, all that stuff behind it. With these being all in the same folder, it knows where to look. So all I have to do is go and so if I want to go to our about page, I think that's when we got some text on. No, our contact. So if I want to go to our contact page, what I do is just do contact.html, and then we put contact so we know what page we're actually going to, and then close that, do that, we save it, we open this. You can see our contact page link down here. I'm changing the color of that. That's bothering me. Where's my anchor up top? Just go black. So now if we go to this contact page, it takes us right to our contact page. And then if we go to our contact page and want to go back, we got to do so we want to go back to our first page, and we just call it the home page. We don't want to call it index because people don't know what the index is, but they know what the home page is. So we save this. We're back at our index. This is our home page because it's called index.html. That's how we can tell where we're at. Click on contact, and you can see it takes us to our contact page because it's showing the page we're on right now, contact. Here's our home page link we just added. Click on that and it takes us back. So that's how you move back and forth through your web pages, is by putting these relative links in there like that. Putting these relative links. That's why I said you don't need the whole HTTPS, ESPN.com, or the inside ranking, all that stuff. You don't need that because the browser and that knows where these pages are. So it says we're all in the same root directory. Just go grab this contact page, open it up for us. These relative paths, they don't know where this is, so it has to use the actual URL, the Universal Resource Locator, to go find those pages and open them for us. So that's the difference between the absolute URLs and these relative URLs. Document relative paths. What these do here is you have a folder, it's called images. It goes and looks in that folder and goes and finds that logo GIF out there. And same with this books PHP overview HTML. If we look out here, our root goes down to this books. In this books folder, it has PHP. It goes and gets that and the HTML file in there, just like I was talking about. So it goes to the books folder, goes to the PHP folder, and inside that PHP folder, there's an overview HTML inside there that it goes and grabs. Books, PHP, and then there's that overview HTML somewhere inside there. Document relative paths that navigate up. Usually put a dot and then a slash index HTML, and that usually goes up one level. You'll end up messing more with this stuff once we get into the JavaScript, and sometimes you may have to play around with it at times to get it to find it properly. Sometimes it may just need a single dot, and that'll take it to the very top level of your file structure and stuff like that. So if you're having hard times accessing your images and stuff, you may want to try the dot dot in front of it to see if it's up a level that you're not finding for some reason, or you're kind of confused on. But as we get more into it, the images in JavaScript, we'll talk more about this document relative paths that navigate up. But that just takes it up a file level usually to try and find it. So if we're in here, we can do the dot dot books, and it'd take it back up to the books page and stuff like that. So link example is a link to a web page in the same folder, and this is the relative one I was just explaining to you. This is how you're going to navigate through your web pages in your site, because they are all in that root directory together. They know where they're at, so you don't need anything but the HTML name of that file. A link to a web page in a subfolder of the parent folder. And so there's where you use that dot dot company services one, so it goes up a level to the parent folder or the subfolder of a parent folder. So like I said, a lot of times with this dot dot, you'll end up playing around with it just to see which way it's moving up and down to get what you need to get, depending on how your file structure is. Link to a web page based on the root folder. The root folder in this case is orders, and then there's a file called cart in there. So you have to get to this orders folder to get to cart, and that's what it's doing. These are all in the same folder, so it doesn't have to look for it. This is using a separate folder called orders that has the code in it, and it has to go out and find it through there. I don't think I had any set up in our demos yesterday for showing that, but this is pretty straightforward. I think I explained it on chapter 1 or 2 slide where it talked about the relative path and everything of it. That might have been on number 1. I don't think I have that open. No, I do. So here, this components of simple URL. Here's the protocol. It's the HTTP protocol. Your domain name, www.whatever-you-call-it.com. And this path here, this our work is the folder, just like it's showing here in orders. So it goes out, has to go to a folder to go get the actual HTML file. And that's what this is doing. It's going out to a folder called our work. Out in this our work folder, there's an index.html file in it. Out in this orders folder, there's an HTML file called cart in it. As you start setting up larger websites that have different pages doing different things to them, you'll end up using folders for them like that. Just like on this example here, they use a books folder. So they keep the index and some HTML pages in here. Then they have an index page in this books that they want to access books with, so they go through that books folder. That would be books instead of orders, and kind of walk through it like that. So hopefully that's not too confusing. Once you start setting up larger websites, it'll start making a lot more sense. And a link to a page at another website. This is the absolute URL, so you have to type in that whole URL of it to go get it. You can do it with images and stuff like that. Pretty much any kind of link like that you can put in there to get it to move around. Here's an example of it. You got your product list, services, shopping cart. Not a lot to see. They're just links, but just different ways to access them. Accessibility and SEO guidelines for links. The content of a link should be the text that clearly indicates where the link is going. So just like in our example here, in our contact page, even though we're going to the index page, users won't know what an index page is. Index page is always our main home page, so it's just easier to put home page on there, so that way people using it know they're going to go back to the home page, the original page they came from. So content of a link should be text that clearly indicates where the link is going. Just like on that, they don't understand what index is, they'll understand what home is, and that's why we called it home page instead of index page, kind of a thing. HTML that creates two lists. You will see lists quite a bit with your HTML coding, so I'd pay attention to this. Here they have an unordered list, and each UL stands for unordered list, and LI is a list item. So if we want to copy this over, I'll go back to my index page since I got most of my stuff on here. So we can paste this in. Did I miss an LI somewhere? Looks like I got all my LIs on there. So we'll see what happens when I try and run it. But you have to start it out with the unordered list. You're telling it you want an unordered list, so it's not going to do anything. But these LIs will put the little dots, as you see on most lists, they'll put the dots in front of the text there. So let's save this, see if it'll open up for me. Yep. So it's missing something somewhere. But as you can see, we got our unordered list, and it just puts the not the contact page. This is our unordered list here. I'll put a little note in here. And so that will give us an unordered list. I don't know why it's showing that extra spot on there. That's causing that error though. So you have the unordered list, and then the next one we have is an ordered list, and it's just this one actually numbers them because the ordered list tells it to number them instead. So our ordered list. And now it should show numbers 1 through 3 on here, hopefully. And there's our order list now, 1, 2, 3. So UL is unordered list. And our ordered list is OL. That's how you tell them apart. When we get into styling, we can change these dots and numbers around to make them look different. We can use Roman numerals for our numbers. We can use squares or diamonds or whatever else we want to for these LIs if we want to eventually. Once we get more into styling, take a look at that. You can see here, and that's what it looks like. JavaScript, PHP, Java, and C#. JavaScript, PHP. Oh, this is missing a closing tag. There's where our whole issue comes from. And that's how much of a pain it can be if you forget to close something or don't open it right, forget quotation marks. So now that space should be gone, and it should look nice and clean for us. That space is gone. It's nice and clean again. So just because we missed that one little closing bracket there, threw that extra space in there for us. So if you come up with issues like that, there, got rid of it. So ordered and unordered list, a definition list, a little bit different. It kind of indents it for you. So instead of LIs for this, you'll use the DL as the definition list. Just like OL was ordered list, UL was unordered list. The DL is a definition list. The DT is the definition title. And the DD is the definition data. We'll take a look at this. DT, am I missing another closing? Yep, another closing tag missing here. Nice job, book. So that should look good now. And you can see on our definition list, here's the definition title, there's the definition data, so you can see it indents it for you, so keep it all separate there. So definition list, ordered list, unordered list. So those are the three main lists you'll be using. I never really use the definition list a lot. Working out in the real world, you will use unordered lists and ordered lists quite a bit in the real world though. So try and get familiar with those. That should be a pretty simple tag to memorize because you will be using them a lot. An inline image element. You have your image tag, IMG, you have your attribute source, and again, we know it's an attribute for the most part because it has that equal sign right behind it. And then the file name that we want to put in there. When you use an image tag, you always want to use this alt attribute. That alt attribute, if your page does not load, your image doesn't load, it can't find it, that alt tag will end up showing the text there instead. So I used my Pikachu yesterday, so let's sometimes if you don't put that alt tag, you'll get mad. I think Dominic, some of the extensions he had yesterday, kept telling him he had to put an alt tag in there. P-I-K-A-C-H-U, Pikachu. This is mad because I don't have a title in here. What is this? So this alt tag also for vision impaired people, when they have a voice reader on these web pages, a lot of them will, they can't see that image of Pikachu, but it will tell them that there's a Pikachu image there. So it usually tells them what this alt tag is here, so they know. So if I file, save this, open with the live server, and there's my Pikachu image. If I put the wrong thing in here, so I'll do PNG because I know that's not right, it shouldn't be. Go look at our web page. You can see now my Pikachu image doesn't show up, but that alt tag I put in there shows up. That's just a way to show what should be there if it actually worked. Yep.
When you're getting the image, are you getting it from like the website or your own computer?
This is the local one I have here.
So can I find what else went on too, or do you want to like you have to get it from the actual site instead?
Depends on what you're doing with it. So like I can go out and then I go Pokemon images. You can go save image as, and I have him, my desktop, these HTML demos. I'm going to create a new folder just so I can show you how this works. Images, I'm going to put him in this image folder. That's a JPEG image. What is that, Bulbasaur? Save that. So now I have that Bulbasaur image out here in my image file. See, my Pikachu is relative, so I don't have to do anything. I just say it's all in that same root folder. It's relative. Just show me it. But now with the Bulbasaur, I have them in an image folder. So now I have to do source, images, Bulbasaur. Hopefully that works. That's a funky extension. And then Alt. Bulbasaur. Close my image tag. Save. And there's my little Bulbasaur that I added. So
I was gonna also ask, so how come the Pikachu image is so much bigger?
Bigger than the other.
that's just the size of it that it came in as.
Is there a way down to resize it, by the way?
Yeah, you can go.
I think it's possible, like, where you kind of just showcase.
Oops.
You kind of just do, like, width.
Yep. And I don't know, 100. Yeah, I got the quotes around at 100% pix.
That's
And
pretty sick.
yeah, you just resize it. And then if you want, you can give your image here an ID even. And then you can go style it up in your head with a style sheet and then set your width and height up in there. So let's give that a try real quick. What I call it, Pika. Cut this width and height out of here. And remember, when we're using the style sheet, the CSS, we put a colon in there. When we're putting it down in our HTML, that's an attribute, so we use that equal sign for it again. And so now, hopefully that will still say the same size. Nope. There we go. So just by adding that ID on it, like here, we can take all the attributes out and just put it up here. And so if we had another one, we could call this Pika also and show you why you don't really want to do this. And it's mad because we're using an ID probably twice. Yeah, so it must be unique. And so it's already yelling at me not to do it, just to give me a warning. Let's see if it lets me actually run it. And you can see it resized it too, because I'm using that same ID here, Pika. This pound sign says I'm using an ID to size my stuff, to set my my style. I called it Pika. I'm calling my ID Pika on both of them, and both of them get this width and height setting. If I take that off, I can actually call it Bulba. It's not going to do anything because I'm not using this ID anywhere, but most of the time as you're doing this, it's nice to get in the habit of putting an ID in some of it if you maybe know when you're going to change it or do something with it. That way it's there ready to go. So now if I save it, everything should go back to how we had it. He goes back to his original size. He stays his little size. And like I said, this is the thing about HTML and CSS. It's try and try again. Keep playing with it until you get it how you want it to look. So that we made him a little bit bigger. We want to mess him up. So if you can, I would recommend not sizing your images on the page unless you absolutely have to, because they can get kind of wonky and not look right by the end of it, by the time you stretch the file out so big and stuff like that.
I think if you just set the width or just the height, it'll like auto adjust the other corresponding property to keep the right aspect ratio.
Oops. So, there he is. So yeah, once we get, like I said, more into the CSS and you get to play around with this stuff more, it'll become second nature, but there's so many properties and stuff that you can put in these things, it's almost impossible to remember them all. Like I said, W3 Schools is a good place to go reference a lot of this stuff. Your book will probably have a lot of it in there.
But overall, no, that's pretty fun.
Yeah, and that's the people that are very creative or like to be creative. This is their thing. Here is this part, this between the HTML and the style sheets and stuff like that. This is where the creativity really comes into it. There's their image in the browser. Image formats supported by most browsers. PNG, the JPEG, and the GIF. I think SNG or SVG is starting to come out a little bit more. They're getting more and more to where they're starting to use more and more different extensions.
Wait, what's CGG for now?
The what?
You said CGG. CGG?
No, I said
Like after.
CVG or something like that, I think is one of them. I forgot what all the extensions are, but these are the three main ones you'll see out there. I try and use like the PNG or the JPEGs the most. The GIFs are the ones that have the little animation with it most of the time when you go use them.
Mm-hmm.
And they work just the same way as anything else. So let's go find one real quick. See if any of these are. So I can. Save image as. And you can see it's saving as a GIF down there. Saving it in my image folder again. Save that there. Go back to my code. I'm just going to copy this real quick. Images, my Snorlax. So if I save this, save, run it, he should eventually move his arm and stuff like. There you go. So you can just add a GIF in there, and it still picks up the animation and everything else. And I think they have web pages and stuff for like GIF creators and stuff like that. So just a matter of the file extension, and you can see here this is JFIF. That's not even listed on here. So I was surprised. That was a different extension I saw before, but it showed up as a JPEG, so I was like, okay, it should work then as a JPEG. So, but PNG, JPEG, and GIF, three most common, and they're starting to see more and more out there now. For some reason, if you put an image in with a different extension and it doesn't work, it's more than likely not supported. So I would go try and find a different image to use instead that has a more commonly used extension.
Like JPEG.
That's probably one of the most common ones. The PNG now too is.
I've seen some PNGs now. What's the difference?
I don't know. I don't mess around with
I don't
images
understand
enough.
what the difference if it's
Maybe,
an
yeah.
image.
So
That's cool.
ERENCUB. Is that what it was, PNG?
Yeah.
JPEG is a lossy format that compresses images, resulting in a smaller file size, but potentially reduces image quality. PNG is a lossless format that preserves image quality, but results in larger file sizes than JPEG. So, just,
So it's smaller.
yeah, just taking up file size, kind of a thing.
So it's more for files, and then that was more for pictures. Basically.
Yeah, PNG sounds like if you want nice looking pictures that you don't have to worry too much about, it sounds like PNG would be the way to go. But JPEG is just probably the more common one because of the file size is smaller and stuff like that.
I think sometimes it goes with emails or something.
Yeah.
Shows that your file's too big or something like that.
Yeah. Special accessibility guidelines for images. For images with useful content, always code that alt attribute that describes the image. And again, that's this alt part. Get in the habit of always putting that in with an image. For images that are used for decoration, code the alt attribute with no value, and even so there's no text, they still want you to put the blank quotation marks in it. And like I said, a lot of times that's for handicapped people. If they can't see the image, it will read it to them. If it's just a decorative image or something, then they don't have to worry about what it is, so that's why you can just leave the alt blank. But like I said, just try and get in the habit of putting this alt tag in when you use an image tag. Here's a simple web page. It's got some stuff going on here. The code for it. Language, meta char set, got a title, got the link to their favicons stuff here. Got an image for a logo, H2 and H3 header. Got some more, got an unordered list here. Got the copyright footer and stuff like that. HTML page for a speaker. And then code a properly structured HTML page using the HTML5 semantic elements. And again, those semantic elements are which ones? Give me an example.
Header.
Main, footer. Yep, nav. Code a relative URL that refers to any file in the folder structure of the website. That's the local ones that we used here. Put it down here, or is it up here? That's the relative because it's in the same place, like they're related, they're all in that same root folder, so it's an easy way to set up. That's how you're going to set up all your links in your web pages to move between pages are going to be set up like that. Describe the use of the title and meta elements in the head section of the HTML document. Most of that stuff's used for the SEO, search engine optimization part of it. Block elements and inline elements. The block elements kind of create their own line, puts a little spacing in between them. They're never in the same line together. Inline elements can be in the same line. Usually they are stuck in the same line, kind of a thing. Common block elements, H1, H2, H3, paragraph, and div. Common inline elements are the line break, the emphasis, the strong, the span. Character entities, the and NBSP, the and copy, the and Q, that kind of stuff. Describe the use of these core attributes, the ID, class, and title. Describe the use of the div and span elements in HTML for a modern website. Describe the use of HTML5 semantic elements. There they are again. Header, footer, main, section, article, nav, aside, figure. Distinguish between absolute and relative URLs. We did that. Absolute needs that whole entire HTTPS path. The relative just needs the file name that's in that same root folder as your index. Distinguish between the use of the anchor element and the image element. Of course, that A is for a link, the IMG is for an image. Describe the accessibility guidelines for anchor elements and image elements. We did that briefly. Describe the 3 types of lists that you can create with an HTML. What are the 3 types
3 types
of lists?
Ordered, unordered, and I don't remember the third.
Dictionary.
Okay.
Yeah. Or definition list, I'm sorry. Definition. Yep. Unordered UL, ordered OL, definition list DL. Down on the DL.
Mr. G,
Yep.
did you just spoil about the next part of JavaScript that we're using dictionary again, like just like in C#?
No. It's not gonna be that. So
Definitions.
So that's chapter 3. I will go through and open the chapter 3 stuff up, the written tests and all that, and the labs and homework with it. And you guys can work on that the rest of the day. Tomorrow's also a lab day to get a lot